Good morning. It's Monday, November 24th. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 781 days old. I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back to the FDD Morning Brief. The news trickling out of Washington yesterday was a big deal for policy wonk propeller heads like me. After more than 20 years of fits and starts, it looks like the United States government is going to issue an executive order labeling the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. It's not a done deal, so don't pop that champagne yet. Also, it's kind of early in the morning, so if you're thinking about champagne at this ungodly hour on a Monday, you might be taking that it's 5 o'clock somewhere thing a little too far. Then again, you could always just mix it with orange juice and call it your morning dose of vitamin C. Your choice. Anyway, the move, if it happens, could send shockwaves across a wide range of Muslim countries that either support or oppose the Brotherhood ideology. And in case you need a reminder, the Muslim Brotherhood's ideology is the cornerstone of every single violent jihadi group that we have fought since 9/11, if not before. So it's exciting times, folks. Stay tuned. Some huge news out of Lebanon yesterday. The Israelis took out Hezbollah's chief of staff in the heart of Beirut. It was an exquisite intelligence coupled with precision weaponry kind of an attack. That's a lethal combo that Hezbollah has just learned to fear, and justifiably. Ali Tabatabai was the de facto military leader of Hezbollah, and his demise comes amidst an undeniable, slow-tempo Israeli campaign to deprive Hezbollah of the weapons it has stockpiled in recent months. Hezbollah's efforts to rearm and regroup after the famous Beeper operation last year, not to mention the liquidation of Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, is serious. Not surprisingly, Hezbollah is getting help from Iran. Shocker, eh? But here's something I bet you didn't predict. Hezbollah is also getting help from the government of Turkey. There could even be some stuff coming from Turkish-controlled northern Cyprus. This is my semi-regular reminder that the Erdogan government is a state sponsor of terrorism. Also, northern Cyprus is occupied by Turkey. So here's where I say with gusto, end the occupation. Oh, and lest anyone tells you that the Syrians have been helpful on smuggling, their efforts have been less than stellar. Predictably, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun condemned yesterday's targeted strike, but I gotta say, he has not done jack all to prevent the Hezbollah buildup that Israel is now working to upend. Believe it or not, folks, Israeli military strikes are paradoxically reducing the likelihood of another war in Lebanon. But I gotta ask, why is Israel the only country actively preventing the return of Hezbollah? Okay, it was another wacky weekend of news. I'm going to give it to you straight up, uncut and unvarnished, so buckle up. Iranian state media on Saturday states that Israel and the United States have tried to take out Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Something tells me both security services could have done so already, but it's good to see the regime nice and paranoid. Let's keep that going. The Israeli Hostage Family Forum, which has been a powerful political force in Israel since the October 7th, 2023 attacks, is now ramping down its activities, with only 3 deceased hostages left in Gaza and perhaps maybe one having just been identified. The fight is not over, but it's also not what it once was. This is the right move on the part of the Hostage Forum, if you ask me. The country needs to begin to prepare to fight its next battles, not relive the last one. This is a hugely important thing, in my view. Let me just stress that here. If we keep talking about what happened on October 7th, ad nauseum, in perpetuity, Israel is never going to get ready for the battles that are coming. And believe me, they are coming. A Hamas delegation led by Khalil Haya, who spends most of his time in Qatar, you should know, Qatar. He's now in Cairo to discuss the possibility of moving to phase 2 of the Trump ceasefire deal. This came amidst reports that Hamas was about to exit the ceasefire deal. That concern was sparked by a Hamas fighter who crossed into Israeli territory or Israeli-controlled territory in Gaza, and he was subsequently gunned down. The Israelis then struck a half dozen Hamas leaders across the Gaza Strip. They depleted their target bank, as it were. Even after that, somehow, Hamas agreed to remain in the deal. But don't hold your breath for a breakthrough. The key to that would be America's dirtbag non-allies, Qatar and Turkey. This is what I argued in a piece that I wrote for the New York Post over the weekend. Take a gander if you're looking for something to read after this program is done. Finally, Lots of news out of Russia and Ukraine. Folks are predictably divided over the highly controversial new 28-point plan floated by the Trump administration that yields too much to the Russians, who we all remember are the aggressors in this war. Follow FTD's talented Russia team analysts for more on that. They've been all over the airwaves this weekend. All right, it's time for the interview. Today's conversation is with Edmund Fitton-Brown. He's a former British diplomat who served all across the Persian Gulf region. He's also worked at the cesspool in Turtle Bay, otherwise known as the United Nations. He's a great guest to have on the program today, given the wide range of news we've been tracking. So let's bring him onto the show. Welcome to the FTD Morning Brief, Edmund Fitton-Brown.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
Good to have you. All right. Let's start with the big news out of D.C. over the weekend. How do you feel about the United States slapping sanctions on the Muslim Brotherhood? Good news, yeah?
I think it is good news. I mean, it's overdue in the sense that we need to get serious about the Muslim Brotherhood. As you know, FDD and many others looking at this have been wanting to make sure that it's done judiciously and successfully, because of course you can call something a terrorist organization, but then you may struggle to make that meaningful in practical political terms. But I think it is a good thing. We saw the initial move from Texas, strangely enough, just about a week ago, where Greg Abbott, the governor, said that both the Muslim Brotherhood and the Council for American Islamic Relations, CAIR, were going to be treated as terrorist organizations in Texas. And I think he's obviously close to Ted Cruz, who introduced the legislation in Washington. He's also close to Donald Trump. So I think we can assume that this is coming.
I think we can too, although I don't think the battle's over in Washington, at least from what I hear. I think there are differences of opinion about the timing of all of this, although I have to say there's no timing like the present. All right, one country that is going to love this designation is Saudi Arabia. Another big fan will be the United Arab Emirates. The Egyptians also, maybe the Bahrainis. I mean, why do these countries hate the Muslim Brotherhood so much? Why do they have so much skin in the game?
Well, those countries are all aligned with each other quite closely on most of these issues. And in the case of Egypt, of course, it had a brief and really alarming brush with being governed by the Muslim Brotherhood when Mohammed al-Mursi was briefly president before there was a military coup that removed him. So Egypt has sort of had a taste of it and didn't like it. They could see that that was going to be, the old slogan, one man, one vote, one time. And that they needed to get rid of Morsi before he was able to consolidate his power. In the case of the Gulf states, probably the ones to highlight really are Saudi Arabia and UAE, as you did. And in the case of Saudi Arabia, they will like this. They'll think it's a good thing. The people who really love it, though, are the Emiratis. I mean, the Emiratis feel really strongly about the Muslim Brotherhood. It's visceral with them, as is their visceral hostility to Qatar, which of course is one of the main sponsors of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Emirates have proscribed the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization for a long time already. And strangely enough, they also proscribed CAIR, CAIR, which I mentioned earlier. They proscribed that as a terrorist organization in 2014. Now, I remember discussing this with Mohammed bin Zayed years ago when I was posted in the UAE. And he talked about his personal anger with the Brotherhood, because when he was a young man, the Brotherhood had monopolized a lot of white collar work in the UAE, including teaching, and they were running things like summer camps and training. And it was very attractive to young Emiratis. It seemed like fun, sort of outward bound stuff, a bit like summer camp in America. And it was only sort of as a young man that he realized that he had been it had been an attempt to brainwash him and his friends. And MBZ is a very decisive kind of guy. And when he feels that he's been manipulated, he gets really mad. And of course, he leads the UAE, and he has set this extremely anti-Brotherhood direction ever since.
Yeah, I got to say, I can identify with MBZ's, the way he chafes at being manipulated. I don't think anybody really likes that. The one thing that I would note is, or maybe two things. One is you mentioned CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations. They're an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation case, that Hamas terror financing case that was disrupted back in 2001. That is that's pretty significant. And unindicted co-conspirator, that and $2 doesn't even get you a full cup of coffee anymore. But it is still significant to note that the FBI called them out back then. Today, they are the most prolific Muslim activist group in the United States. They call themselves a human rights group of some, I mean, it's kind of bizarre, or a civil rights group. It's bizarre, and it'll be interesting to see what happens there in Texas. The other thing I'll just mention about these countries that are opposed to the Brotherhood, it's that admixture of religion and politics that they really, really don't like. These are countries, they want to control the politics, their local politics, and they want to control religion. And when the Muslim Brotherhood tries to muscle their way in, they muddy the waters. And so these autocratic states that are pragmatic, this is why they don't like them. I happen to back their moves here. I think it's important that they maintain that control, especially when the alternative is the ideology that inspires Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hamas, and all the other bad actors that we fought over the years. But let's talk for a minute about those bad actors, those countries that are going to be grumpy about a Muslim Brotherhood designation out of Washington: Qatar and Turkey. I feel like a broken record, I swear. And then maybe Malaysia, we could probably throw in there. How do you think this is going to impact their ties with the United States if the designation goes through?
So I think this is one of those classic cases where they will lobby in advance to try and prevent it. But if it happens, they will back down, and we won't hear very much of it after that. These are countries that are shrewd enough to understand that their relationship with the United States is much more important than any single issue like this. They won't like it because they can see that the US move against the Muslim Brotherhood is actually in conflict with the US's reliance, particularly on Qatar and Turkey as foreign partners. And so, you know, there's a distinct possibility that over time, as the US investigates the Muslim Brotherhood, it's going to find things about Qatar and Turkey that will make their lives more difficult in their bilateral relations with the United States. But the reality is that any Muslim country might proscribe a crusading Christian organization as being, you know, unacceptable in their country. It would be extraordinary if the Turks or the Qataris carried this beyond the current lobbying and objected to the United States' own right to set its own rules about these kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, though, I can't identify too many Christian organizations that they could target as in reciprocity, but I suppose we can keep an eye on that. I want to pivot back to the Saudis for a minute. They just had a pretty huge week here in Washington. MBS, the Crown Prince, came here, conquered, returned. What's your perspective on that visit by the Crown Prince? Did we offer too much too soon? Should there have been more of a push for normalization with Israel? Have we given up the F-35 too easily? What's your top line assessment of what went down last week?
Well, I mean, certainly it was a very elegantly done visit. It was, you know, the hospitality was magnificent. The, if you like, the sort of the atmospherics between the two leaders were very positive. So, you know, in that respect, it was a great statement of the Saudi-American partnership. There are one or two things about it that we could question, and I think generally speaking, there's a question to be asked about whether President Trump drives a hard enough bargain when he has a friendly leader visiting. You know, he sometimes does seem to miss the opportunity to press home a particular point. In this case, well, we have the F-35 deal. It'll take a while for that to actually deliver. But we've got the issue of the Israeli qualitative edge that needs to be sustained. So that begs a question about whether that has gone too far without balancing the legal requirement regarding Israel's edge. The other side that you mentioned, which was the Abraham Accords, of course, we don't know whether there's an understanding that is not fully public yet. The Saudis are going to be obviously very sensitive on this. They don't want to be unable to control the narrative when they eventually do join the Abraham Accords, as I imagine they will at some point. But one of the things that I imagine that President Trump will have said to MBS is that the Trump plan in Gaza does, if the Palestinians do the right things, it does offer a route towards a Palestinian state. And the people who are stopping that from happening are not the Israelis, but Hamas. And so there would be a question to MBS, which is, are you prepared to give Hamas a time unlimited veto on your freedom of diplomatic action? So I think there might be more to this. We've looked at other people who are interested in the Abraham Accords. Obviously, Kazakhstan joined, and there has been talk about Indonesia, for example. And whether the Saudis at some point get comfortable that this is happening and it's not creating a significant backlash in the Islamic world, and they decide that they will proceed, that might come as a surprise when it happens. We may not see it coming because the Saudis are not going to want to lose control of the narrative.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on here right now. I should just note, I was reading this morning, the Saudis just delivered a massive amount of oil to Syria. They're trying to get, I think anyway, a little bit more leverage over that country. And that's a tug of war that's going on between the Turks and the Qataris on one side, the Saudis and the Emiratis on the other. So there's a sort of a tug of war that's happening there. There's a tug of war over the Palestinian issue. Obviously, you got the sponsors of Hamas, again, Qatar, Turkey, Iran, trying to influence them probably in the wrong direction. And then you've got the Saudis pushing them. In fact, I just read today that Mahmoud Abbas, the 90-year-old autocrat who has single-handedly driven the Palestinian Authority into the ground, totally corrupt, he's been forced to actually revise his constitution. So that's coming soon. It's going to be interesting. I mean, I can see the Saudis with some influence across the region right now. I think they have a vision for a more pragmatic Middle East. But I also think they've got an uphill battle. I think Israel is going to be key to them integrating into that U.S.-led alliance. On the QME thing, I just got to note, you're absolutely right to mention it. The thing that I'm hearing out of Israel is, yeah, they can go ahead and sell the F-35s, but there better be normalization by the time they're delivered, which would be 5 years from now. So that's a pretty long timeline. So anyway, a lot happening there on the Saudi file. Thanks for that update. I want to draw on your UN expertise while I have you. You worked at the UN, that cesspool of corruption. Have you ever seen a UN Security Council, an UNSCR, get adopted like the one that we saw last week? This is a plan put forth by an American president, a controversial one at that, and not even one edit, as I understand. I mean, nobody took the pen to this thing. It just got adopted. And this thing specifically targets Hamas to get dismantled. Hamas is not even a proscribed terrorist organization at the UN, as you well know. So how did this happen?
Well, I mean, I'm glad you raised it, John, because this hasn't had as much attention, I think, in the media as it deserves. I think this is an extraordinary thing that's happened. And as you said, it's gone through unedited. It's gone through with 13 votes in favor and two abstentions. So Russia and China have abstained. Algeria has voted for it. Pakistan has voted for it. And so this is an extraordinary diplomatic coup. I think it does reflect the fact that there is a widespread international understanding that President Trump has invested a lot of personal prestige in this plan, and people are not keen to be seen to be wreckers. But even so, yeah, you know, historically, US sponsored resolutions at the UN have, you know, they've had to make concessions to other interests in the Security Council. In many cases, they've actually failed. They've been vetoed by the Russians or the Chinese or both. In other cases, they've been substantially redrafted. So this is extraordinary, but it's extraordinary in another way as well, because in a way, it moves the Gaza crisis onto a new phase. It moves us to a phase where you have international backing for this. It's, in a way, it changes the international legal position on Gaza. And what that means in practice is that it puts Hamas completely on the spot about whether they accept or whether they reject the will of the international community. And of course, they've rejected it. They have formally and noisily rejected it. That greatly strengthens Israel's position, because they are in a position where they can now look at this and say, well, we want this to succeed, and we're working constructively with the US and with other international stakeholders. But Hamas have absolutely refused. And that means that there are some things that can't happen until Hamas change their position. And of course, there's an interesting test here, and that is whether the Turks and the Qataris, who, as you and I both know, are party pre in this. They're very pro-Hamas. They are, in some ways, they are state sponsors of terrorism. But they have got the trust of President Trump in delivering Hamas to play its part. When Hamas now spectacularly refuses and blows this up, that could also affect Qatar's and Turkey's credibility in Washington.
Yep, it's a high wire act for both of them. I got to say, though, this UNSCR is essentially, it's now international law that Hamas needs to be dismantled. That is, for me, the thing that is just, it's like a smack in the face every time I think about it. It's amazing. I mean, the UN, it seems like it exists to promote Hamas most days. And then this one day, everybody seems to vote against it. Anyway, tremendous. I mean, really a shocking swing here in terms of momentum. I'm going to give full credit to Mike Waltz and his team over at the UN for having achieved this. And by the way, Algeria signing on, remarkable, given how nasty Algeria has been. That's a country we don't talk about here enough, but maybe we'll talk about it in a minute. Anyway, you spent a fair amount of time in Yemen. Lucky you. I know that things have gone quiet there in recent weeks, but are you worried that this is the calm before another storm?
Yes, I am, very much so. I keep using the term unfinished business with Yemen, because when the United States stopped fighting the Houthis in early May, after that 7-week conflict, you may remember that there was a completely unsatisfactory Omani statement about the ceasefire, where they said, well, we can announce that the US and the Houthis will no longer attack each other, and that means that it's now safe for ships to use the Red Sea. A complete non sequitur, because of course the attacks on ships in the Red Sea happened before the United States got involved in fighting the Houthis. And of course, a lot of ships were attacked in the Red Sea after that ceasefire in early May. The Houthis are a revolutionary and extremely aggressive extremist militia, and they have a lot of statements that they've made and claims that they've made, which they show no sign of backing off from these. First of all, you have the Houthi scream, which includes death to America, death to Israel, a curse on the Jews. So this is hate speech actually as a slogan of the movement. And then you've got their claim that they should be the people who control the holy places in Saudi Arabia. They believe that they have a historic right to the whole of the sort of southern half of the Arabian Peninsula. They have attacked shipping in the Red Sea before the Gaza conflict. They will do it again. They have learned that this is a very effective way of grabbing international attention. It's a form of blackmail. They've also formed an instrumental partnership with Al-Shabaab in Somalia, and that is partly aimed at colluding to make the seas off the two coasts unsafe. So, and finally, I guess I should mention also that we have these 17 death sentences that they've just issued on a bunch of people that they have arrested. Sort of extreme intimidation of the population. And they're starting to talk once again very aggressively about the Saudis and threatening Saudi Arabia. So essentially, we're in a situation where we either just keep on giving in to Houthi blackmail, as if it was the Sopranos who've come to increase the rent on your restaurant. And you give in, and then a couple of weeks later they say, oh, inflation, we're going to have to increase the rent again.
Yeah.
So the international community either needs to put its foot down and stop this, or else it will go on forever.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Just very briefly before I let you go, you wrote a piece recently about some news out of Algeria and Morocco. This is the Western Sahara. We don't talk about it much on this program, even though Morocco has really been solid on the Abraham Accords. What's the story there briefly in Northwest Africa?
Well, this is a long-standing dispute where you have the Western Sahara is a fairly large stretch of mainly desert country to the south of Morocco that is under Moroccan control, and now through the through this month's UN Security Council resolution, again another good Security Council resolution, appears effectively to be under Moroccan recognised sovereignty. This was a dispute between Morocco and Algeria. Algeria has been fighting against Morocco's interests in the Western Sahara, and in the Western Sahara there is a terrorist organisation called the Polisario Front, which is extremely aggressive and violent and has had backing from the Algerians and also backing from the Iranians. And what we can now say is that the Moroccans have been placed in the right in their claim to Western Sahara. They will give it autonomy, though, so you have a sensible outcome where the people of the Western Sahara will be given some self-governing status. And that seems to me to be a thoroughly positive move. One piece of really good news, especially as you say, because Morocco is one of the most responsible and one of the most forward-looking actors in the entire Islamic world.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was another good one out of the UN. I mean, geez, who would have guessed after the cesspool kept voting the wrong way for years? Now all of a sudden they got 2 in a row. Pretty amazing. All right, we're going to leave it there. I want to thank you, Edmund Fitton-Brown, for joining us today on the FTD Morning Brief.
Thanks, John.
All right, folks, it's time to shut it down for the day, but don't fret. There's plenty to read on our website. We've got loads of content to view on our socials, so go ahead and give that a gander. Meanwhile, it's almost Giving Tuesday, so please do consider giving. Just head on over to ftd.org/invest to learn more. Tune in Wednesday for another gripping, fascinating, and fact-filled episode of the FTD Morning Brief. I'll be there. Will you? Until then, as always, I'm Jonathan Schanzer, signing off for FTD.